The story of the Gothic Cathedral is, at its core, a story of an obsession with light and a war against the crushing weight of stone. To understand how medieval builders achieved the impossible, we must first look at the world they inherited. For centuries following the collapse of the Roman Empire, European architecture was defined by the Romanesque style. These buildings were massive, earthbound, and somber. They were built with thick, heavy walls designed to support the immense weight of stone barrel vaults. In a Romanesque church, the walls acted as the primary support system. They had to be incredibly thick because the rounded arches used for the ceilings exerted a continuous outward pressure, a physical force known as lateral thrust. This thrust wanted to push the walls outward, causing them to buckle and collapse. To prevent this, architects had to limit the height of the buildings and minimize the number of windows. Every hole cut into a wall for a window weakened the structure, leaving the interiors of these great stone halls dark, cold, and disconnected from the heavens. However, by the mid-12th century, a cultural and spiritual shift began to take root in the Île-de-France region. This shift was championed by figures like Abbot Suger of Saint-Denis, who believed that bright is the noble work, but being nobly bright, the work should brighten the minds, so that they may pass through the true lights to the true light. This theological mandate required a new kind of architecture, one where walls were no longer barriers, but translucent veils of glass. The master masons of the time were faced with a daunting engineering paradox. How do you build higher than ever before, replace heavy stone walls with massive sheets of glass, and yet prevent the entire structure from collapsing under its own gravity? The answer lay in a transition from load-bearing walls to a skeletal frame. This transition marked the birth of the Gothic skyscraper. The medieval architect began to function more like a modern structural engineer, intuiting the flow of forces through stone. They realized they didn't need to support the roof with a solid wall, they only needed to support it at specific points. This realization allowed for the creation of a stone skeleton, a grid-like system that channeled the weight of the roof down through narrow columns and out through external supports. By isolating the forces, they liberated the space between the columns, allowing for the installation of the breathtaking stained glass windows that define the era. This was not just an aesthetic choice, it was a triumph of statics. The Gothic cathedral became a machine made of stone, a delicate balancing act where every pinnacle, arch, and gargoyle played a role in holding the structure in equilibrium against the relentless pull of the earth. The first great secret of the Gothic Revolution was the move away from the semicircular arch of the Romans. While the round arch is aesthetically pleasing and stable for smaller spans, it possesses a fundamental structural flaw when scaled to massive heights. It generates a massive amount of lateral thrust. The weight of the stone at the top of a round arch, the keystone, pushes the sides of the arch outward with nearly as much force as it pushes downward. To counter this, the Romans and Romanesque builders had to use incredibly thick masonry abutments. The Gothic masters discovered that by breaking the arch and bringing it to a point, they could dramatically alter the physics of the structure. The pointed arch is mathematically more efficient because it directs the weight of the stone more vertically. By increasing the steepness of the arch, the horizontal thrust is significantly reduced, allowing the supports to be much more slender. This innovation was paired with the development of the ribbed vault, a structural masterpiece that changed the way ceilings were perceived. In earlier periods, a stone ceiling was a solid, heavy mass of masonry. If one part of the vault cracked, the entire ceiling was at risk of failure. The Gothic ribbed vault, however, functioned like the ribs of a human chest. The ribs, or arches of stone crossing diagonally, were built first as a self-supporting framework. The webbing, or the spaces between the ribs, was then filled with much lighter, thinner stone. This meant that the ceiling was no longer a monolithic weight pressing down on the walls. It was a lightweight canopy whose weight was concentrated precisely at the corners where the ribs met the columns. This concentration of force was the key to the Gothic miracle.
Because the architect knew exactly where the weight would land, they could concentrate their reinforcements only at those specific points. This is why Gothic cathedrals have such pronounced, clustered columns. Each shaft in a cluster often corresponds to a specific rib in the vaulting above, tracing the path of the force from the ceiling all the way down to the foundation. This geometric logic allowed for an unprecedented increase in height. Builders were no longer limited by the thickness of their walls. They were only limited by the strength of their stone and the precision of their geometry. As cathedrals like Notre Dame de Paris and Chartres began to rise, the people of the Middle Ages looked up in awe, witnessing stone seeming to defy its own nature, stretching towards the clouds with a lightness that felt divine.
As the master builders of the 12th and 13th centuries pushed their vaults higher and higher, they encountered a terrifying physical reality. The higher the ceiling, the more unstable the walls became. Even with the efficiency of the pointed arch, the sheer mass of the stone roofs at heights of 30, 40, or even 48 meters exerted a persistent outward pressure. If the walls were made thin enough to house massive stained glass windows, they would inevitably bow outward and collapse under the weight of the roof. The solution was one of the most iconic and daring innovations in the history of engineering: the flying buttress. This was, in essence, an external stone exoskeleton. Instead of placing the support directly under the load, the Gothic architects moved the legs of the building outside the main structure. The flying buttress consists of two main components: the massive outer pier and the flyer, which is the inclined arch bridging the gap between the pier and the high wall of the nave. To the casual observer, these look like elegant wings, but to a structural engineer, they're a sophisticated mechanism for managing lateral thrust. The flyer catches the outward push of the roof at the exact point where that pressure is most intense and transmits it across the open air to the heavy outer piers. This allowed the interior walls of the cathedral to be relieved of their structural duty. Suddenly, the walls were no longer required to hold up the building. They became curtain walls, mere screens of glass and light. This was a revolutionary concept that prefigured modern skyscraper design by 7 centuries. However, the physics of the flying buttress involved a delicate calculation. If the flyer was placed too high, it wouldn't catch the thrust. If placed too low, the top of the wall would still buckle. Builders often used 2 tiers of flyers, one to resist the wind pressure against the high roof, and another to counter the dead weight of the stone vaults. These structures had to be perfectly balanced. If the external pier was not heavy enough, the horizontal force from the cathedral would simply push the pier over. This led to the structural use of the pinnacle, the pointed stone caps atop the piers. By adding the immense vertical weight of these decorative-looking spires, the architects increased the downward force on the pier. This redirected the diagonal force of the buttress into a more vertical path, ensuring the entire system remained anchored to the bedrock. It was a masterpiece of static equilibrium, where every ton of stone was strategically placed to fight the invisible forces of gravity and wind. While the soaring arches and flying buttresses capture the imagination, the true secret of a cathedral's longevity lies beneath the earth. Medieval builders lacked the sophisticated soil testing equipment of today, yet they had to support millions of pounds of stone on varying types of terrain. The statical secrets of the Gothic era begin in the darkness of the foundation trenches. Because these structures were often built over many decades, sometimes centuries, the risk of differential settlement was immense. If one side of the cathedral sank only a few inches more than the other, the rigid stone skeleton above would crack and the vaults would come crashing down. To prevent this, the master masons employed a variety of ingenious techniques tailored to the geography of the site. In many cases, the foundations of a Gothic cathedral are as deep and complex as the building is high. Builders would dig massive trenches, sometimes 10 meters deep, until they reached solid limestone or good ground. These trenches were then filled with rubble and lime mortar to create a massive, continuous platform.
In places like Amiens or Reims, the footprint of the foundation is significantly wider than the walls above, acting like a giant snowshoe to distribute the weight over a larger surface area. In more challenging environments, such as the marshy soil of Winchester or the sandy banks of the Seine in Paris, they turned to timber piling. Thousands of oak piles were driven deep into the wet earth until they reached a harder strata. These piles, kept submerged in water to prevent rot, provided a stable forest of support for the stone giants above. The mastery of these foundations also involved a primitive but effective understanding of loading. Builders knew that stone is strong in compression, but weak in tension. Therefore, the foundation had to ensure that the pressure remained purely compressive. If the ground shifted, it would introduce bending forces that stone cannot survive. To monitor this, master masons used plumb lines and levels with obsessive precision. They understood that the cathedral was a living thing that would settle over time. Some architects even built pre-settlement measures into their designs, slightly over-tilting certain elements so that they would move into a perfect vertical position as the building reached its full weight. This hidden subterranean engineering is what allowed these stone skyscrapers to stand for 800 years through earthquakes, storms, and the tremors of the modern world. The Gothic master masons did not have access to calculus, finite element analysis, or the laws of Newtonian physics. How then did they determine the thickness of a pier or the curvature of a vault? The secret lay in sacred geometry. To the medieval mind, God was the great geometer, and therefore a building designed according to perfect geometric ratios would be both aesthetically divine and structurally sound. They relied on a system of proportions derived from the square and the equilateral triangle, methods known as ad quadratum and ad triangulum. By using a simple compass and a straight edge, they could derive complex structural dimensions that ensured the cathedral's center of gravity remained within its footprint. They used the golden ratio and the Pythagorean principles to create a unified field of forces. For instance, the height of the main nave was often a specific multiple of the aisle width. This created a rhythmic distribution of weight. If the geometry was followed precisely, the line of thrust, the path that gravity takes through the stone, would stay safely nestled inside the masonry. They used template designs passed down through secret lodges, where a successful ratio used in one cathedral, like Chartres, would be slightly pushed and tested in the next, like Reims. They were in effect running a centuries-long experiment in the limits of stone, using geometry as their primary diagnostic tool.
No history of Gothic statics is complete without discussing its greatest failure, Beauvais Cathedral. If the Gothic era was a space race to the heavens, Beauvais was its most ambitious rocket. Built to be the tallest in the world, the choir of Beauvais reached a staggering height of 48 meters, about 157 feet. The architects pushed the stone skeleton to its absolute physical limit, making the supports thinner and the windows larger than anything previously attempted. In the year 1284, the impossible happened. Part of the choir's high vaulting came crashing down. The collapse of Beauvais remains a subject of intense study for modern structural engineers. The failure wasn't due to a lack of bravery, but a lack of lateral stability. The pillars were so tall and slender that they began to vibrate in the wind, a phenomenon known as aeroelastic fluttering. Without enough mass to dampen these vibrations, the stone eventually fatigued. The builders had underestimated the cumulative effect of wind loads at such extreme heights. When the vaults fell, it marked the end of the high Gothic expansion. Never again would a medieval builder try to go higher. The ruins of Beauvais stand today as a haunting reminder of the static ceiling, the point where the dreams of the architect finally collided with the uncompromising laws of physics. While we focus on the stone, the stability of a cathedral was equally dependent on what lay between the stones. Medieval mortar was a sophisticated mixture of lime, sand, and water, sometimes supplemented with secret ingredients like crushed brick or volcanic ash. Unlike modern cement, which hardens quickly and becomes brittle, medieval lime mortar took decades to fully cure.
This was actually an advantage. It allowed the building to settle and flex as it was being built. The mortar acted as a slow-moving cushion, absorbing the minute shifts in the foundation and preventing the stones from cracking under the initial pressure. Furthermore, recent laser scans and chemical analyses have revealed a hidden secret, the Iron Age of the Gothic. We long believed these were purely stone structures, but we now know that many cathedrals, including Notre Dame de Paris, are held together by an internal skeleton of iron staples and tie rods. These iron chains were wrapped around the perimeter of the building like a belt, cinching the structure together and preventing the walls from bowing outward. Without this alchemy of iron and lime, the stone skyscrapers would have likely crumbled under the first great storm. As the cathedrals rose above the city skylines, they encountered a new enemy, the wind. At 150 feet in the air, wind speeds are significantly higher than at ground level, and a cathedral's massive roof acts like a giant sail. The static secrets of the Gothic period thus had to account for dynamic loads. The great spires, such as the one at Salisbury or the now lost central spire of Beauvais, were masterpieces of aerodynamic engineering. They were often built as hollow shells of stone to reduce weight, reinforced with internal timber scaffolding that remained inside the spire forever to provide flexibility. The master builders understood that a rigid building is a breaking building. They designed the upper reaches of the cathedrals to have a certain degree of give. The flying buttresses, while appearing solid, actually allowed for microscopic movements. The wind pressure hitting the windward side of the building would be transferred through the roof timbers into the stone vaults and finally down the leeward buttresses. This complex distribution system ensured that the energy of a gale force wind was diffused throughout the entire three-dimensional grid of the building. It was a primitive form of base isolation and wind dampening that we still use in modern skyscraper design today.
One of the greatest mysteries of Gothic architecture is the lack of written blueprints. While we have thousands of cathedrals, we have almost no technical manuals from the 12th or 13th centuries explaining the math behind them. This is because the static secrets were protected within the Mason's Lodge, a secretive, highly organized guild system. Knowledge was not written, it was geometric and oral. The master mason used a master circle or a secret square to derive all proportions. By using a single measurement, such as the width of the central nave, they could determine the thickness of the walls, the height of the windows, and the depth of the foundations using only a compass and a string. This oral tradition was a form of living software. As a master mason moved from one site to another, he carried with him the data of previous successes and failures. If a vault cracked at one cathedral, the mason would adjust the ratio of the pointed arch at the next. This created an evolutionary process of engineering. The lodge acted as a peer review system where structural innovations were tested in real time. These men were the first systems thinkers, viewing the cathedral not as a collection of parts, but as a holistic organism where every stone was in a state of constant communication with its neighbors. This shared intelligence allowed for the rapid spread of Gothic technology across Europe in less than a century. To the medieval builder, stone was the only material capable of reaching the divine, but stone has a fundamental limitation. It is incredible under compression, being squeezed, but very weak under tension, being pulled apart. The static secret of every Gothic cathedral is the total elimination of tension. If a stone beam is pulled even slightly, it will snap. Therefore, the entire cathedral must be designed so that every single force is pushing downward or inward. This is why the curved lines of the Gothic are so important. The pointed arches and ribbed vaults are designed to keep the line of thrust, the invisible path of gravity, within the center of the stone. If the line of thrust ever wanders outside the masonry, tension is created and the building will fail. This is also why we see the heavy pinnacles on top of the buttresses. By adding more weight, compression, to the top of a pier, the mason squeezes the stones together, making the pier more stable against the horizontal push of the roof. It is a paradox of engineering. By making the building heavier at specific points, you actually make it safer and more stable. While we marvel at the stone, the Gothic cathedral would not exist without its hidden wooden crown. Above the stone vaults lies a massive timber roof structure, often referred to as the forest, la forêt. This wooden framework serves two critical static purposes. First, it protects the stone vaults from the elements. Water is the greatest enemy of lime mortar, and a leaking roof would lead to a structural collapse within decades. Second, the timber roof acts as a giant damper for the wind. The timber trusses are not bolted to the stone, they sit on top of the walls. This allows the wood to expand and contract with temperature changes without cracking the masonry below. During a heavy storm, the timber roof absorbs the initial impact of the wind, flexing and shifting to dissipate the energy before it can stress the rigid stone vaults. In the Great Fire of Notre Dame in 2019, the world saw what happens when this forest is lost. The stone vaults, suddenly exposed to extreme heat and deprived of the roof's stabilizing weight, became vulnerable to collapse. The relationship between the flexible timber and the rigid stone is the ultimate secret of Gothic resilience. A fascinating and often overlooked secret of Gothic statics is the use of acoustics as a structural diagnostic tool. Master masons knew that a perfectly balanced building would ring or resonate in a specific way. They would often strike the pillars or the ribs with hammers and listen to the pitch. A clear, consistent tone indicated that the stone was under uniform compression, meaning the weight was distributed perfectly. A thud or a vibrating rattle indicated a dead spot where the stone was not carrying its load, signaling a potential structural failure or a hidden crack. Furthermore, the very shape of the cathedral, designed for the resonance of Gregorian chant, was inextricably linked to its statics. The height-to-width ratios that produced the most beautiful reverb were often the same ratios that provided the greatest structural stability. To the medieval mind, this was proof of the music of the spheres. If a building was in tune mathematically, it was in tune physically. This meant that the ears of the mason were just as important as his eyes when it came to ensuring the cathedral would stand for a millennium.
In modern architecture, we often think of windows as holes cut into walls, but in a Gothic cathedral, the stained glass is the final piece of a complex structural puzzle. To the medieval mason, the window was not a void, but a non-load-bearing membrane. The static secret here lies in the tracery, the delicate stone lacework that holds the glass in place. This tracery was not merely decorative, it acted as a secondary bracing system. By dividing a massive window opening into smaller vertical sections, mullions, the architects created many columns that helped stabilize the wall against wind pressure. Furthermore, the integration of light had a profound psychological impact on the construction process. Because the goal was to maximize the lumen, or divine light, builders were constantly forced to innovate ways to reduce the mass of the piers. This led to the development of clustered columns, where a single thick pillar was replaced by a bundle of slender shafts. From a static perspective, this increased the surface area of the support without increasing its total volume, providing more points of contact for the vaulting ribs above. The result was a structure that looked fragile, almost impossible, but was actually a rigid cage of stone and iron, perfectly tuned to hold the weight of the heavens while letting in the light of the sun. In the mid-14th century, a catastrophe struck Europe that nearly ended the era of cathedral building, the Black Death. This plague didn't just kill people, it killed data. Because the secrets of Gothic statics were held orally within the masons' lodges, the sudden death of a master mason often meant that the specific geometric keys for a building were lost forever. This led to a period of structural stagnation and, in some cases, dangerous improvisations. We see the evidence of this in cathedrals that were half-finished, or where the style suddenly shifts from the high-reaching rayonnant to the more flamboyant but less vertically ambitious styles. In some instances, later builders, lacking the deep intuitive understanding of their predecessors, added supports that were either redundant or paradoxically harmful. They began to rely more on visible mass and heavy iron chains, rather than the elegant, invisible balance of the earlier High Gothic. This period teaches us a vital lesson in the history of engineering. The stability of a skyscraper is not just in its stone, but in the continuous transmission of human expertise. When the chain of knowledge broke, the stones themselves began to feel the weight of gravity more heavily. One of the most advanced secrets of these medieval skyscrapers is how they handle the passage of time and the changing of seasons. A cathedral is a massive thermal heat sink. During the summer, the outer stones expand under the heat of the sun, while the inner core remains cool. In the winter, the reverse occurs. This creates thermal stress, which can cause stone to crack or mortar to turn to dust. The Gothic builders accounted for this through the use of lime mortar and expansion joints. Unlike modern Portland cement, which is rigid and brittle, medieval lime mortar is self-healing. When a small crack forms due to thermal expansion, rainwater dissolves a small amount of the unreacted lime in the mortar and redeposits it into the crack, effectively healing the wound over decades. Additionally, the complex geometry of the flying buttresses allowed for a minute amount of breathing. The arches could flex by several millimeters as the building expanded in the heat. This dynamic equilibrium is why a Gothic cathedral can survive for 800 years, while a modern concrete bridge might require a total overhaul after only 50. The builders didn't design a static object, they designed a structure that could move with the pulse of the earth. The final challenge to the statics of a cathedral often came from the towers. These weren't just decorative spires, they were the engine rooms for the massive bronze bells that governed medieval life. A single bell could weigh several tons, and when swung, it created dynamic loads, vibrations that could easily shake a stone tower apart. To counter this, the towers had to be built with significantly thicker walls and deeper foundations than the rest of the cathedral. The secret was the use of massive internal timber frames that were completely decoupled from the stone walls. The bells hung from these wooden cages, which absorbed the kinetic energy of the swinging bronze. If the bells had been attached directly to the stone, the rhythmic vibration, resonance, would eventually turn the mortar to powder and collapse the tower. This understanding of vibration dampening shows that the medieval mason was not just a master of static loads, weight, but also a pioneer in managing dynamic forces, making the cathedral a precursor to the earthquake-resistant buildings of the modern age.
In the 21st century, our understanding of Gothic statics has undergone a digital revolution. For centuries, we could only guess at the precise stresses within the walls of a cathedral like Notre Dame or Chartres. Today, using LiDAR, light detection and ranging, we can map every millimeter of a cathedral's surface to create a digital twin. This technology has revealed secrets that remained hidden for 800 years. For example, laser scans of Washington National Cathedral and Beauvais have shown that these buildings are in a constant state of slow-motion dance, leaning and shifting in response to groundwater levels and atmospheric pressure. By plugging this laser-captured data into finite element analysis, FEA, the same software used to design jet engines and SpaceX rockets, engineers can now see the stress. We have discovered that some flying buttresses were placed with such incredible precision that they are only active during high winds, acting as a reserve support system. Modern science has confirmed that the medieval mason's intuition was often nearly identical to the results produced by our most advanced supercomputers. We are not just preserving stone, we are finally translating the silent language of medieval geometry into the mathematical language of the modern world. One of the greatest challenges in the static life of a cathedral is the intervention of modern materials. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, restorers often tried to strengthen these buildings by injecting high-strength Portland cement or inserting rigid steel beams. Paradoxically, this often caused more damage. Because medieval stone and lime mortar are designed to be flexible and breathable, the introduction of a rigid, non-porous material like modern concrete creates hot spots of stress. When the building naturally shifts, the stone around the rigid concrete begins to crush itself. We have learned that to save a Gothic cathedral, we must respect its original static philosophy.
Modern restorers now use sacrificial mortars and stainless steel anchors that allow for thermal expansion. We have realized that the secrets of the Gothic architects weren't just about strength, but about compliance. The building survives not because it is stronger than the wind, but because it knows how to yield to it. This realization has fundamentally changed how we approach the longevity of all masonry structures, proving that sometimes the primitive way was actually the more sophisticated solution. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through the skyscrapers of the Middle Ages, we must ask, why does the statics of a 13th century church still matter to us today? The answer lies in the concept of deep time. Modern skyscrapers are often designed for a lifespan of 50 to 100 years. The Gothic Cathedral was designed for eternity. The static secrets we have explored, the pointed arch, the flying buttress, the hidden iron chains, and the living mortar, were all part of a singular goal: to create a space that defies the temporary nature of human life. These buildings are the physical manifestation of a society that was willing to invest in a future they would never see. A master mason might lay the foundation stones, knowing that only his grandchildren would see the vaults completed. This long-term engineering required a level of structural honesty that is rare in the modern world. Every stone had to be perfect, every joint precise, because any shortcut would be revealed by gravity over the coming centuries. The Gothic Cathedral stands as a monument to human ambition, a reminder that when we combine rigorous geometry with an understanding of the natural world, we can create something that truly touches the sky. The static story of the Gothic Cathedral is a story of balance, not just the balance of stone and mortar, but the balance between the heavy reality of the earth and the light-filled aspirations of the spirit. These Middle-Age skyscrapers were the first structures to prove that humans could use mathematics to conquer the crushing weight of gravity on a massive scale. They paved the way for the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and the modern glass and steel towers that define our cities today. As the sun sets through the rose window of a great cathedral, the light hits the floor at the same angle it has for 8 centuries. The pillars continue to compress, the buttresses continue to push back against the wind, and the forest of timber above continues to shield the stone. The secrets of the Gothic masters are still there, hidden in plain sight, etched into every curve of the pointed arch. They remind us that engineering is not just about numbers, it is an art form. It is the art of making the heavy feel light, the dark feel bright, and the finite feel infinite. The Gothic Cathedral is a silent stone heartbeat, a testament to the fact that with enough vision and the right geometry, even the heaviest stone can be made to fly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the engineering marvels of the Middle Ages. The cathedrals we see today are more than just stone and glass. They are a testament to human resilience and the eternal quest for the light. If you found this exploration of Gothic statics insightful, please give this video a like. It helps others discover these hidden stories of our architectural past. What is your favorite cathedral, or which architectural mystery should we decode next? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have many more journeys planned through history, science, and the secrets of the world's most iconic structures. Stay curious, and we will see you in the next part.